Welcome to the Neutral Corner for the week of August 1st. I'm recording this literally as I cook. I'm cooking some potato gnocchi for dinner tonight. It's cooking right there in my kitchen. I got some nice tomatoes cooking down right now. I'm gonna add a little bit of Italian sausage and make it kind of a ragu. And no, you can't have any. No! Oh, you wanna know why? You wanna know why? Because there's not enough for you. That's right. Yeah, because I'm cooking some for your mother. That's what did you... Sorry guys, I didn't take my medication today. What did you say? Okay. Let's just get to the ring walk. Today's question comes from Anonymous. Doesn't want his name out there, or maybe it's a her. They don't want their name out there. Anyway, they asked, now that the Mayweather-Berto fight is supposed to be back on pay-per-view, not on CBS, how do you think this affects the upcoming Cotto-Canelo fight, which is supposed to be on pay-per-view? That's a really good question. Look, I don't know what to expect with Floyd Mayweather anymore. We know he's in training. We know Andre Berto's in training. But that fight hasn't been announced yet. You just don't know what to expect from Floyd, right? And you look at the way he handled the fight with Pacquiao, how he kind of played with the media and how everyone was hanging on his word, and it was written into the contract that he had to be the guy to announce the fight, and everyone thought it was going to be Thursday, made everyone wait until Friday, blah, blah, blah. I think that's the same kind of thing going on here. It's showmanship. Look, Mayweather's not dumb. He pays attention to social media. He knows that people are not very excited about the Andre Berto fight. So this could just be another rumor, another ploy to get people talking about the fight and thinking it's going to be on pay-per-view. So maybe a month from now, they announce, hey, we decided to put it on CBS for the fans for free. And not only that, but we're going to do a great co-feature, and Keith One Time Thurman's going to fight Sean Showtime Porter. Who knows, right? If they do it that way, if they spin it that way, then everyone's going to be like, oh man, they're going to make a pay-per-view. Now it's free. All right, I guess I will watch, So look, just don't pay attention to any of that. But the second part of your question, you talked about Cotto-Canelo. I do think that there's a little bit of an obstacle now for that fight, because it was just announced that October 17th, New York City, Madison Square Garden, Gennady Triple G Golovkin is going to unify titles with David Lemieux, and that is going to be on HBO pay-per-view. K2 Promotions, HBO, they're testing the waters at pay-per-view, right? Like I said, October 17th, that's a month, about a month before the supposed Cotto-Canelo fight, because that one's not signed yet either. They were thinking about November 7th, and then I think November 20, 20 something. I can't think of the date, but either the beginning or the end of that month. Look, Cotto wanted that fight in New York, and they were still negotiating possibly putting that on in MSG. But when you got a pay-per-view literally a month before that at MSG, I don't know, man. I mean, they might crunch the numbers and decide, like, look, we can't do it in New York. We might not be able to do it at all now. So that might delay that fight. I think the Cotto-Canelo fight will still come off, but I think now they can't put that in New York. They have to put that in Vegas. And they can't put it at the beginning of November. They got to put it later in the month. I think, November 25th or somewhere around there. I can't think of the date, but I think they have to move it now. They were still negotiating and playing with different venues and different dates. And from what I've heard, Canelo was considering possibly going to New York. They were exploring it because he hasn't fought out there yet. But now that you got that Triple G Lemieux fight there, like I said, the month before, I don't know if they can put it there because it's too much saturation in that market in too short a period of time. But I still think Cotto-Canelo happens. And look, guys, we got a great schedule for the rest of the year. The Mayweather-Berto thing, just put that out of your mind for now. We know Mayweather's fighting September 12th. I believe that's the date. Again, my mind's a little, with dates right now, it's a little off, but just ignore that. Because look, at the end of August, we've got Santa Cruz Mares. That's the best PBC fight to date, right? Then in September, Vladimir Klitschko is fighting Tyson Fury. That's the best heavyweight fight we've had in a while. And then in October, we're getting that Triple G Lemieux fight. The winner of that fight, I'm sorry, they're the middleweight champion of the world. I know a month later, we're gonna get Cotto Canelo, and that's possibly the fight of the year, but I'm not gonna rate them the middleweight champ of the world. Either way, it's a great fight. We've got great fights for the rest of the year, and there's still a few more that are being negotiated. So all the daily talk you hear on Twitter and Instagram about Mayweather Berto, just block that out of your mind, okay? Until it's signed, sealed, delivered. And be excited for the upcoming matchups that we have. This has turned out to be a great year in boxing. Speaking of a great year in boxing, we had a couple of amazing fights in Las Vegas this weekend. Maybe not, but you know, we did have one of the best fighters in the world. But let's start with the PBC card that was in the Palms Casino, a few miles south, a little bit earlier in the day than where the Kovalev-Mohammedi fight was. In the main event, Beibut Shumenov scored a unanimous decision win over BJ Flores. This was for a cruiserweight interim title. The scores were 116, 112 3 times. The punch stats of this fight were virtually even. Shumenov landed 104 of 420 punches, Flores 117 of 404 punches. Here's the key stat there, guys. Both fighters threw just over 400 punches. This was a 12-round fight. Do the math on that. This was just not a good fight. Neither guy did much, but I will say this. It appeared to me that Shumenov had a game plan. He was backing up, he was running, but it was obvious to me that he was looking to touch Flores, lure him in, and just score counter punches. BJ Flores, I talked about this last week. This was his time to shit or get off the pot. He's had a couple of opportunities in his career, and he just seems to be one of those guys that always falls short because he just doesn't go for it. This is one of those fights where he not only needed to cut off the ring, but he needed to go for broke. He needed to start swinging for the fences, and I just didn't see that. So, look, I don't think this was a 116, 112 kind of fight. I thought this was a little bit tighter. I admit, I didn't watch it live. I watched the replay. I skipped through most of the rounds, but from what I saw, this looked like more a 115, 113 kind of fight. But for Shumenov, who used to be a light heavyweight titleist, and now he's an interim cruiserweight titleist, I guess he's going to get a full title shot from here. For BJ Flores, I think that, he does a good job with the commentating, and he might even have a future as a trainer, because he seems to have a good eye for things. He can break things down when he's doing his commentating. So if he wanted to get into that world, I think he could. But he's just not a top-level fighter, and that's just what it is. Now, a little later that night at the Mandalay Bay, HBO Boxing had a doubleheader. And in the first fight, Jean Pascal took on a pretty unknown Cuban fighter, Yunieski Gonzalez. This guy had a lot of amateur fights in the Cuban system, but he does not fight at all like a Cuban. You would never know this guy's a Cuban unless you heard him talk. Jean Pascal won a very, very disputed decision. 96-94, 3 times were the scores, so 6 rounds to 4 for Pascal. I scored this fight the exact opposite, 6 rounds to 4 for Gonzalez. The punch numbers in this fight were pretty even as far as punches landed, but Gonzalez threw over 200 more punches. He was the much more active guy. Here's the thing. I did not like the decision in this fight, okay? I don't see how I could give Pascal any more than 5 rounds if you were really trying. I could live with a draw, but I won't go as far as to say this was a robbery. And I'll tell you why, because throughout the fight, even though Gonzalez was more active, his punches were thrown with horrible technique at times. He looked downright amateurish. the right hands weren't coming straight, right? He wasn't shooting them straight. He kind of did this weird up and down thing. He did like a Hollywood punch. That's how they teach you to do stunts in movies. You go up here and punch down at the camera. And that's kind of how he's throwing those right hands. Pascal saw that and he was ducking under him. He was getting really, really low. I was just waiting for one uppercut from Gonzalez. I never saw it. I never saw an uppercut. He knew Pascal was going to lunge in with these crazy shots. Pascal dives in with his head down and flails his arm up like this, right? But those shots land for him. He must hit the bag that way. I haven't seen him in training throwing shots like that, but he must, because he does it with accuracy. He landed, I want to say, I don't have it right here, but he landed, I think, over 40% of his punches. So Pascal, even though he doesn't throw much, he's more accurate. And at the end of the fight, Gonzalez looked worse. His face, his eyes looked a little bruised up, his face, and Pascal, for the most part, looked pretty good. So this was a fight where, what do you score more, right? What do you prefer? Do you prefer the guy landing the crisper, more accurate shots, or the guy that was doing more work? For me, when you have that situation, but you have the fighters landing the same amount of punches, I go with the more aggressive guy. Now, if Pascal outlanded Gonzalez, then maybe I'd lean a little more to him. But I just thought that Gonzalez outworked Pascal. He just did more work in 6 of the rounds, I felt. I felt that down the stretch, he let Pascal work his way back into the fight in the middle rounds. And he gave up a couple of late rounds, clearly. But, this is one of those things where I think Gonzalez saves face. I think that we'll absolutely see him again on HBO air. Pascal was talking about deserving a rematch with Kovalev, if he got the win here. I don't need to see that. I don't need to see a Kovalev-Pascal rematch. I mean, maybe if they did it in Atlantic City or something, maybe if Pascal went to Kovalev's home base, and that seems to kind of be where it's been for him, for Kovalev. Or, maybe down to Florida where Kovalev lives sometimes, something like that. But I don't know. For Gonzalez, look, if he fought Kovalev, I think he'd get knocked out. I just do, because the shots are so inaccurate and he smothers his work. There was a few times where he had Pascal on the ropes and he'd lunge in on him, then throw. He wouldn't throw as he was lunging in. He'd kind of jump in, then punch. And I don't know how out of focus I am, but the shot was like this when he landed. He wasn't landing at the end of his shot, So I don't know, man. For a guy who has hundreds of amateur fights, Gonzalez has hundreds of amateur fights in the Cuban system, you think he'd be able to see that, make those adjustments. He just didn't. But he's still, just because of his power, his aggressiveness, and his chin, I think he's a player at 175. And I wouldn't mind seeing him in there with a lot of guys. For Pascal, if he gets a Kovalev rematch, that's cool. But I don't think he's going to get it this year, because I know Kovalev's team is talking about fighting in Russia in the fall. And one of the potential opponents is Arthur Beterbiev, who is, as far as I know, has been fighting only on PBC cards. So I don't know how that would work out, but he must have the availability or something to fight over there in Russia. But that's what they're talking about next for Kovalev. And then maybe next year we'll see Pascal in there again. But, this fight, I'm not going to say robbery, but I did not like the decision. Now, in the main event, Sergey Kovalev handled a mandatory, I think this is for his IBF light heavyweight title against Nadjib Mohammedi. This fight, what can I say? Pretty much, I thought maybe the Frenchman would take Sergey a few rounds. I thought Sergey would want to get a little work in and maybe punish him a little bit, because Mohammedi has been working with Abel Sanchez, and Sergey and Abel kind of have this little beef between them. It's weird. None of them really give details about it, but they obviously had a falling out. And you could see that Sergey wanted to kind of make the fight last a little longer. He knocked Mohammedi down in the second round, and he was telling him, get up, get up. He was motioning. He wasn't talking trash as much as he was saying, get up, I want this thing to go a little longer. And I say that because in the third round, Sergey came out really controlled. He didn't come out there like trying to get him out of there. He came out there slower paced, and it was actually a jab that Mohammedi jumped into. Yeah, because I think Kovalev hit him with a left. And it seemed to hit him right here and push his nose. So I don't know if it broke something up in here. It could have maybe broke the orbital bone, but it seemed Mohammedi was kind of holding right around here. So he didn't make the count, and that was it. We didn't need to see it. I mean, there's not much to say about this fight. But if Kovalev does fight Beterbiev in Russia later this year, I think they were talking about late October. That's another great fight, guys. I mean, we are getting amazing fights. You know, these two cards in Vegas this weekend were shit cards, right? They were just not very good matchups. And the fans let the promoters know because both events had very empty venues. You know, with the main events card with Kovalev and Pascal, they weren't giving away freebies. So everybody that was there paid. And the PBC card, I don't know if they gave away freebies for this one. I haven't confirmed that. But even if they did, man, that place was empty. So, you know, look, it's the dog days of summer. It's like 110 degrees in Vegas right now. So maybe that's what it was. But those crowds were bad. This Saturday, August 1st at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, Danny Swift Garcia out of Philadelphia fights against Paulie Malignaggi. For Paulie, it's been over a year since he just got mowed down by Showtime Sean Porter. I think that was last April. So I don't know. I don't know if this layoff is going to help him or not. But he's going up against Danny Garcia, a career 140-pounder who's been fighting at catchweights. I think his fight against Lamont Peterson earlier this year was at a catchweight. Don't quote me, but I want to say it was like 143, 144. This is at 147 pounds, which is where Paulie's been fighting. But obviously, neither of these guys is a crazy power puncher, especially Paulie. Paulie's always relied on his slickness, his skills. I always thought he had underrated hand speed. He was one of the fastest guys out there for a while, but he's getting long in the tooth and he's been off for a year. So there's gonna be some big ring rust. For Danny Garcia, if you don't get the stoppage, this really looks bad. He should, at this stage of his career, be able to get a faded Paulie Malignaggi out of there. Now, Paulie got knocked out in 4 rounds against Porter last year, but Porter is a strong, you know, pressure type of fighter, right? He just throws punches, he's a mauler. Obviously, Danny Garcia doesn't fight that way, so I do think this will go past 4 rounds. In fact, I do think it could go into the later rounds. We could see this going into the 8th, 9th, 10th round. But Danny Garcia's got to get the stoppage for me. If he wants the big business that's to be done at welterweight, if he wants those fights, look, I mean, he's with Al Heyman. Heyman's got Sean Porter. He's got Keith Thurman. He's got prospects like Errol Spence and these guys coming up. There's plenty of guys at welterweight for Danny Garcia to fight. We all know Floyd Mayweather is going to come back next year and look for that 50th win, right? We know that's going to happen. If Danny Garcia keeps on winning and looks good, he could get that fight because he's tailor-made for Floyd. Floyd would just tear him up. He's got to look good. You know, if he wins a decision here, it's a moral loss. But in the co-feature to this PBC on ESPN card, Daniel Jacobs takes on Sergio Mora in a title defense. Oh, hang on. Oh, God, I'm sorry, guys. I just got sick there for a second. Yeah, Daniel Jacobs, who is an awesome human being, great fighter, but this is the guy who fought for a vacant middleweight title last year against Jared Fletcher of Australia. And I don't know who he is. He might have been the guy that delivered my mail last week or so, I don't know. But he's going to defend his title against Sergio Mora, who is a career junior middleweight, punches with the power of a corpse. So, you know, I don't see how Mora is going to be able to keep Jacobs off of him. To me, Mora is one of those guys that's kind of like a BJ Flores, who is just never got it done at that highest level. Danny Jacobs is from Brooklyn, so he's going to be in front of his home people. And if he wants to really make a claim for himself as a top middleweight, a division that is owned by some much bigger names that we talked about earlier, he's going to have to make a statement. He's going to have to get Sergio Mora out of there. The one thing I'll give Sergio Mora, he is pretty crafty and he knows how to survive. So, you know, this could be one of those ugly 12-round fights that you just can't wait for it to be over. If Jacobs could somehow score a big knockout victory here, that's big for him. You know, there's not much business for him at middleweight because Al Haymon's not going to work with the other promoters. And most of the brass at middleweight is with the rival promoters. But there's that one guy, Peter Quillen. If Kid Chocolate can get back to 160 pounds, and I don't know if he can, but if he can, obviously, Al Haymon would want to put Jacobs against Quillen. For that fight to be marketable, for the Brooklyn fans to care, you know, more than just his buddies that he grew up around, you know, he's got to look good in this fight. Sergio Mora is a guy who's tough to look good against. So, you know, I obviously I favor Jacobs, but I'm probably going 12-round decision for him in this fight.